June 15, 2023 special session of the Clarksville City Council is now called to order. In the absence of our chaplain of the day, I've asked Mark Riggins, General Manager of our Gas and Water Department, to offer our prayer. Councilman Deanna McLaughlin will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll invite you to stand if you wish. Mark?
Please bow your head with me. Dear Father God, we love you, Lord. We thank you for the many blessings that you give us each and every day, Lord. We thank you for times like this where we can gather together to represent this great city and, Lord, serve you by serving our families, our community. Lord, I pray that we do that well. Lord, be with us now. We ask for discernment and wisdom as we call upon all that we know and who we are, Lord, and I pray that we make the best decisions beyond ourselves, but to serve this community to our utmost ability. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Okay.
Mr. Zacharias? Here. Ms. McLaughlin? Here. Mr. Little? Mr. Red?
Here.
Ms. Markey?
Here.
Ms. Smith? Mr. Holloman?
Here.
Ms. Allen? Ms. Reynolds?
Here.
Ms. Streetman?
Here.
Mr. Shekinab? Ms. Lovato? And Mayor Pitts.
Here.
All members are present with the exception of Mr. Little, Ms. Smith, Ms. Allen, and Mr. Shekinab.
Let the record reflect Councilperson Little is in the House. Next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, please read the consent agenda.
All items in this portion of the agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the council and may be approved by one motion. However, a member of the council may request that an item be removed for separate consideration under the appropriate committee report. Ordinance 104, 2022-23, second reading, an ordinance improving amendments to Clarksville City Code Title 9, Chapter 4, Operation of Vehicles, Section 9-447, Speed Limits Established, Title 9, Chapter 4, Operation of Vehicles, Section 9-449, Speed Limits in School Zones and Playgrounds, and Title 10, Chapter 1, Section 10-101, Certain Misdemeanors under State Law, and Ordinance 126, 2022-23, second reading, an ordinance amending Title 1, Administration, Officers, and Personnel, Chapter 2, City Council, Section 1-204, General Rules of Order of the Official Code of the City of Clarksville, relating to the notice of agendas for all meetings.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll entertain a motion in a second. Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of the consent agenda. Councilperson McLaughlin, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to pull Ordinance 104, 2022-23 for separate consideration.
Thank you. We'll take that up right after the consent agenda. Anyone else wish to be recognized? Seeing none, are you ready to vote on the consent agenda? The one item on consent agenda, Ordinance 126. All members, please cast your vote.
Mr. Zacharias?
Aye.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Little?
Aye.
Mr. Red?
Aye.
Ms. Markey?
Aye.
Mr. Holloman?
Aye.
Ms. Reynolds?
Aye.
Ms. Streetman?
Aye.
Ms. Lovato? And Mayor Pitts.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's 10 yes, 0 no, 0 abstain.
The consent agenda is adopted. We are now ready for the item pulled from the consent agenda, Ordinance 104, 2022-23. I will call on the sponsor of that ordinance, Councilperson McLaughlin. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I make a motion for approval.
Second.
Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of Ordinance 104. Councilperson McLaughlin, you're recognized.
I move to amend Ordinance 104, 2022-23 by deleting the current version of Ordinance 104 that was approved on first reading and substituting therefore the following as amended version of Ordinance 104, 2022-23. The city clerk sent this out to everybody. There was some extensive markups to get it within compliance. The essence is the same. So basically, under the amended version, it states that law enforcement has the option to cite somebody to city court where they would be subject to a $50 fine, or cite them on a state ticket, which would allow that person to go to general sessions court to have their case adjudicated. We already did that. So
Motion's been made in favor of the amendment, properly seconded. Any questions or comment regarding the amendment? Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized on the amendment.
Oh, probably it's the general, not the.
Okay? All right, back to you.
So how do they decide? Like, what is the guidance or have to decide whether I give you a $50 or a $200?
So currently, under state statute and city code, law enforcement already has the discretion as to which ticket they want to write. Case in point, it's rarely used, but I understand that you can cite somebody to city court for speeding in a school zone versus going to state court. So I would imagine to be on a case-by-case basis, but my hope is that, you know, this ordinance will encourage people to curtail their speeding in neighborhoods. And if there is a situation where a study is done in one of our wards on a residential street and it justifies traffic enforcement, that might be a case where law enforcement is directed by the chief to cite on a state citation.
Okay.
Anyone else? Seeing none, hearing none, are you ready to vote on the amendment? Let's try this on the board. We are on the amendment. All members, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
10 yes, 0 no, 0 abstain.
The amendment is adopted. Councilperson McLaughlin, you're recognized.
Thank you. I just want to state that I appreciate everybody's help on this, from the city attorney to the assistant city attorneys, Ernie Griffith, chief of police, and the district attorney. And I hope that you all support this so that hopefully we can encourage people to slow down in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to be recognized? Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized.
I just have a general question, and it might be more for the Public Safety Committee, but how are we going to advertise the change? I mean, that's a concern that's been addressed, is getting the community made aware of it. I know ignorance of the law is not, but I mean, this is a huge change, and there's been some concern of, well, how are we going to advertise this? Have we thought about that at all?
We've got the media in the room currently, and I suspect they'll be reporting on that. And then we will turn our Cracker Jack communications team loose on it as well. And hopefully, if we get in the pocketbooks of a few folks, they'll spread the word.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, hearing none, are you ready to vote? All members, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
10 yes, 0 no, 0 abstain.
Ordinance 104 is amended, is adopted. Thank you. We're now ready for the fiscal year 2023-24, first reading and public hearing. I will entertain a motion to go into public hearing. Motion been made and seconded to revert to public hearing. Any objection? Seeing none, we are now in public hearing. We will allow 5 people to address the city council in public hearing. You will have 5 minutes. If you'll approach the well, you'll have 5 minutes to address the council on the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to revert to regular session. Motion been made and properly seconded to revert to regular session without objection. We are now back in regular session. The first item on our regular session budget ordinance is ordinance 133, 2022-23. First reading, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2022-23 budget and approving the fiscal year 2023-24 operating budget for the Central Business Improvement District, CBID, and the Community Revolving Investment Fund, CRIF. I'll entertain a motion and a second. Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of ordinance 133. Any questions, comments from council? Hearing none, seeing none, are you ready to vote on ordinance 133? All members, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
10 yes, 0 no, 0 abstain.
Ordinance 133 passes first reading. We're now ready for item 2, ordinance 134, 2022-23. First reading, an ordinance amending the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2022-23 and adopting the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2023-24 for CDE light ban. I'll entertain a motion in a second. Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of ordinance 134. Any comment or question from council regarding ordinance 134? Seeing none, hearing none, are you ready to vote? All members, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
10 yes, 0 no, 0 abstain.
Ordinance 134 passes first reading. We're now ready for item 3, ordinance 135, 2022-23 first reading, an ordinance amending the 2022-23 budget and approving the 2023-24 annual action plan and budget and authorizing application for community development block grant and home investment partnership funds as well as other programs. I'll entertain a motion in a second. Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of ordinance 135. Any comment or question regarding ordinance 135? Seeing none, hearing none, are you ready to vote? All members, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
10 yes, 0 no, 0 abstain.
Ordinance 135 is adopted, first reading. Now ready for item 4, 136, 2022-23, first reading, an ordinance amending the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2022-23 and adopting the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2023-24 for the Clarksville Gas and Water Department. I'll entertain a motion and a second. Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of ordinance 136. Any comment or question regarding ordinance 136? Seeing none, hearing none, are you ready to vote? All members, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
10 yes, 0 no, 0 abstain.
Ordinance 136 is adopted, first reading. Now ready for item 5, ordinance 137, 2022-23, first reading, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2022-23 and adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2023-24 for the Internal Services Fund. I'll entertain a motion. And properly seconded in favor of ordinance 137. Any comment or question regarding ordinance 137? Seeing none, hearing none, are you ready to vote? All members, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
10 yes, 0 no, 0 abstain.
Ordinance 137 is adopted, first reading. Item 6, ordinance 138, 2022-23, first reading. An ordinance amending the fiscal year 2022-23 budget and establishing the operating budget for fiscal year 2023-24 for the Clarksville Parking Commission, a proprietary fund. I'll entertain a motion in a second. Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of ordinance 138. Any comment or question regarding ordinance 138? Seeing none, hearing none, are you ready to vote? All members, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
10 yes, 0 no, 0 abstain.
Ordinance 138 is adopted, first reading. Or item 7, ordinance 139, 2022-23, an ordinance amending the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2022-23 and adopting the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2023-24 for the Clarksville Transit System. I'll entertain a motion in a second. Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of ordinance 139. Any comment or question from council regarding ordinance 139? Hearing none, seeing none, are you ready to vote? All members, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
9 yes, 1 no, 0 abstain.
Ordinance 139 is adopted, first reading. Now ready for item 8, ordinance 140, 2022-23, first reading, an ordinance amending the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2022-23 and adopting the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2023-24 for the governmental funds and adopting the tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024. I'll entertain a motion in a second. Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of ordinance 140. Do we have amendments? If you will, light up your light and we'll call on you for amendments. Okay, I'll take those off the board since I've made a list and won't confuse that with questions and answers. Councilperson Marquis, you're first up with an amendment. You're recognized.
Thank you. I'd like to just make a motion for my amendment. It's to reallocate certain capital project funding. And then I can explain a little bit more what's going on.
Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of the Marquis amendment.
All right.
Councilperson Marquis, you're recognized.
All right, so looking at the needs of the city, there are certain capital projects that we really need to get done that do not have enough funding. So looking at what we have going on right now, I am, with this amendment, reallocating the funds to the Frosty Warren project and putting it into need more road improvements, as well as drainage mitigation, stormwater rehab, and spot intersection improvements. Those projects for the three that I'm moving $2 million to, that's all that is required to finish those projects. And I think we should just finish them. Need more is badly needed to be, started and finished, but it does not have enough funds. So I'm moving the remainder of the money into Need More to get, all those funds up and rolling. I think that while we do need to do something with Frosty Warren right now with the needs of the city, it will not help with the traffic situation. And I think that Frosty Warren is a project that we can approach from a different avenue compared to what is needed right now in the city. Every month, all we hear about is the traffic situation, and we hear about the drainage and sewage. And here's an opportunity to help finish some of those projects and get some of those up and rolling that still need funding. So that's why I am trying to move the funds. And then if this passes, what I would like to see done with the Frosty Warren project is ideally to either sell it or do something different with it. Right now, next to the Frosty Warren, we have the Vulcan TIF district. It is an area that's up and coming. We can do so much, or we have an ability to do a lot with the Frosty Warren that we did not have in the past. In the past, it would not sell because there were some issues that the city has since fixed. It's in an area that is revitalizing and up and coming. I think that if anything, right now would be the best opportunity for that. And if not, then there are a couple other avenues of approach that we can do that is not going to cost the city $32 million and will not address other immediate needs of the city. That's my spiel on the situation.
For purposes of clarity, we recommend that all motions to amend be referred to and sequentially numbered. That would be number one.
Okay, you heard the legal counsel will refer to the Marquis amendment as amendment number 1, so we can keep up with these things. Okay, you've heard the explanation, questions and comments from council. We've got a second. We've got it properly before us. Councilperson Streetman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Being as that many of these are all with the streets capital and the different projects that are listed here, what is the street department? I know that the sponsor of the amendment stated that these funds are needed to finish these projects and the funds aren't available for them. What feedback have you gotten from the street department?
Question for the sponsor.
Sorry.
Yes.
I have not gotten feedback from the street department. I went solely based off the financial records for the need of the funding.
Would they be able to get to the projects this year?
I would have to ask the streets. But like I said, I went directly with what was needed of the financial records that showed this project has this much money and how much it needed.
Well, I know, and usually
Yeah.
they're kind of in stages of this gets done this year. There's, planning that's involved with the funding, especially, with the different things that involve the transportation 2020 plan. So that's why I just didn't know if moving this they would even be able to facilitate the projects as everything's already currently stated and planned.
I don't know from the streets' perspective.
Okay. For me, again, without knowing that without hearing from the street department or this even being conversation had with them to ensure that the funds would be utilized, I would hate for the funds to just sit there and not be able to have anything done with them. And in regard to Frosty Morn, we've already put a lot of money into that as well. So I'd hate to see that money being wasted that we've utilized on it. And I really think we have to think forward with thinking with the Vulcan. I understand where the sponsor's coming from, but thinking forward with the Vulcan property being developed and everything that's going to be, and Frosty Morn being right there with it. I know many years ago when the downtown commons was first talked about, everyone thought it wouldn't be a great idea. It's right in the middle of town, and there was just a concert there the other night that held more people than it's ever had. There's also there was a lot of negative feedback in the beginning for Liberty Park. And again, that's something that's utilized on a regular basis. So for me, this is another opportunity for us to be able to have something for our public. It's also an opportunity as things get further along where our nonprofits in the community are going to have a place where they can be housed and cost them maybe less money than what they're paying. It's going to be hopefully a great place for small businesses that don't have a business front that'll be able to utilize. I know there's been talk of a working kitchen. There's been a lot of different things that have been brought forward. And I just feel like it's going to be a good spot for us to utilize. And we just have to think for the future for it. And I know without a doubt that, we have needs that we're trying to address, but without the street department, having input on this and saying that, yes, we definitely need this right now to be able to do it. It's already planned for in the future for them to be able to do everything. So for me, again, I understand where you're coming from on this, but I have to say we need to kind of stay where we are on this.
Councilperson McLaughlin, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the sponsor looking into how ways to move money for our transportation needs. May I ask permission to go out of session to ask Ms. Mata a financial question?
Sure. Any objection to hearing from Ms. Matta, our CFO? Hearing none. Ms. Matta, if you would please approach, and Councilperson McLaughlin, you have a question.
The previous speaker mentioned that the Frosty Morn project is already underway, and I do see crews over there have for the last 3 weeks. Do you have like an estimate of how much money has already been spent on this project?
Yes, year to date, the total expenses on that budget, we have, it's almost $300,000. And we also have almost $600,000 encumbered on that project. That's why there's a comment on the budget amendment that says that we would still honor those encumbrances and the contracts that were already in place. Therefore, environmental mitigation. Couldn't think of the word. It's an environmental mitigation, and it's architect and engineering services are what are already contracted on there.
Thank you. I knew you'd have the numbers. One more question. Since the amendment is essentially moving money from the general fund to capital projects, would the money, if this passes, would the money stay in the general fund until those capital projects?
It's not moving from the general fund. It's still within the capital projects fund, but it's moving from general government capital project to a streets capital project.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Matta. Councilperson McLaughlin, anything else?
Oh, no, sorry, Mary, thank you.
It's okay. Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized on the amendment.
Yes, thank you. I would like to, last week we talked, every time we come up with some of our ordinances for rezoning, our city has grown to the point where we need to do infrastructure before we build. I think there was a conversation last session regarding infill at Tiny Town. I think we're at the point now that it's no longer we need to build to qualify for the infrastructure. Our infrastructure is at the point if you ask our residents, they say that they are overwhelmed. I do have a question for the sponsor. I see that you left almost, $9.6 million into the Frosty Morn project. Is that to continue? No.
Question to the sponsor, Councilperson
Oh, I
McGee.
see. I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's the offset.
Math. So then my question still back, thank you. My question is still back to the sponsor is, would you consider, postponing this until our meeting on Tuesday to have a conversation with the streets department?
Yes, yeah, so I actually wrote a note here about that to see what they say. I'll say I did contact them on another issue that I was gonna bring up to it and I didn't hear about it, so I have to, I guess, be a little bit more assertive to get this info, but I will contact them again.
So are you going to make a motion to,
You have the
postpone?
floor. You can make the motion
Well, I
to
want
postpone.
to make sure that that's her intent, Mayor.
I'm sorry,
I don't want to,
make a motion for what?
to postpone this until Tuesday.
Second.
No, I'm not making that motion. I am asking the sponsor.
Mr. Baker?
I don't think you can postpone an amendment to an amendment.
Okay, all right.
You can vote the amendment down, and
And then
remember
bring it
the
back.
red rule does not apply to amendments, so
Amendments.
you could bring it back on
Tuesday.
second reading.
Okay, you've heard the explanation. Any other comment or question regarding the amendment?
I still have the floor, Mayor.
You have the floor.
Yeah, so I would like to the sponsor say that I would like to ask you to have the conversation. I'm very amenable to having this amendment, but I would like to, I do agree with the previous speaker that we don't want to put money where it can't be used in the next year. But we also have an empty position in neighborhood services, so it goes both ways. But if you, so I would like to wait until you can have that conversation.
Councilperson Little, you're recognized on the amendment.
Yes, thank you. I do agree that a lot of these projects need to get done, and I understand that they are currently being worked on in phases. At the same time, I don't necessarily want to pull everything from a project that taxpayer money has already been invested in. There's a plan going forward. We already have pretty much site plans and stuff like that have already been drawn up. So money's been invested into this, and I don't think it should necessarily be the project to be pulled away from, since so much has already been done to build it up. That's all.
Thank you. Councilperson Reynolds?
Yes, I would like to ask the chair of the Parks and Rec. I don't know that, or the neighborhood services, I'm not sure which one. Oh, he's not, that we actually have plans drawn of what we're going to do. Is that correct, Mayor?
We are going through a highest and best use study. We are probably 90% finished with that. We want to make sure when we pull the trigger on final construction drawings that we're completing a building that will be used primarily by that neighborhood, the Red River neighborhood, but also be able to be used by the entire community. So we're about 90% done with the preliminary plan, floor plan. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and again, back to the person who, to the sponsor, the council person who is that represents this area is not here tonight. So that's another reason that I would really like to postpone it. I'd like to hear from you what you think, though.
Is that a question to, question to the sponsor? Councilperson Marquis, you're recognized.
I have not spoken to her, and I'm actually kind of surprised that she isn't here. I was expecting to hear her point of view. I'm not sure, I guess at this point. Obviously, I can bring it back next week, but I will definitely contact the streets department for sure. And then I am not obviously allowed to speak to her in person because of sunshine, so I was expecting for her to be here.
I can tell you she is ill.
Okay.
I probably just broke 3 HIPAA laws, but she is ill. Anything else? Councilperson Streetman, you are recognized on this amendment.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. I did just check with a couple members of the street department just to get some information from them. And they do have these projects staggered and staged. Some of them, they can't even do the project until they get the right of way anyway, and that's all going to take time for them to be able to do. And again, where they've already got projects where they're going, they need to get those completed so that it's not affecting anything else. And again, we're not just having the money sit there unavailable for use. So like I said, I had two different ones from the street department answer my question to each of them. So for me, I think we need to vote this down and trust that our street department is bringing to us what they need from us.
Councilperson McLaughlin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Baker, can't an amendment be withdrawn if the person who made the second, no? Google Robert's rules is
It's
a
clean,
liar.
it's cleaner to vote it down and bring it back. There's no prohibition on time. Any other comment or question? Seeing none, are you ready to vote on the amendment? We're voting on the amendment. Every member, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Hang in there. Madam Clerk, take the vote.
3 yes, 7 no, 0 abstain.
Amendment fails. Now on Councilperson Reynolds, you are recognized for Amendment 2.
So I'd like to propose an amendment to increase the tree board budget to fully fund the tree inventory.
That's a motion. Do I hear a second? Motion been made and properly seconded. Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you. Yes, so first of all, I would like to thank the mayor because we did have a discussion at the finance meetings, where I discussed my concern for not fully funding it. We are simply rolling what we paid for, what we had set aside last year to this year. But as everyone knows, the funding and what things cost doubled in 2023. And so we did not, as timely as we could have, reached out and started the process. And by the time we got into the contract, it was almost double. So that's why I'm asking for an additional $30,000 to fully cover the tree inventory. There were opportunities discussed at the meeting, and I want to be very transparent. The mayor indicated that after the first half, we could fund it next year for the second half, or we could have the forester also complete the inventory. I was kind of on the fence about that until our actual tree canopy study, which we did put in the budget last year. Our tree canopy study was returned. And I've brought this up in a previous meeting. It's still preliminary, but our tree canopy in 7 years has decreased by 54%. Our city tree canopy is at 17%, and it was at 34% in 2015. I think it's more important that we utilize our city forester to now begin working on, how to mitigate this decrease in our tree canopy and not have her out inventorying trees. One thing that just to remind the committee, the council people, a tree canopy study is an aerial imagery of how much of our city is covered by trees, and versus green space versus asphalt, concrete, and roofs. And a tree inventory will tell us how many trees we have, where they are, and what kind they are, and their health. So it's not just an inventory of how many trees are out there and counting the size. It is a very specialized kind of review, and it's very important because some of the things that we're looking for is to reduce our liability, heading off pest outbreaks, and improving the overall health of our urban forest. I also included a couple maps from the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit. When I put in Montgomery County, and it narrows down, we have 11 census tracts that are vulnerable to climate change, and the areas are 80% lacking in tree coverage. When I add families living in poverty, that's on the back side of the page, we now have 6 of those 11 of our areas are living in poverty without tree coverage. That means people that can't afford their electric bill, don't always pay for their air conditioning, also don't have trees in their community to keep them cool and safe during the hottest days in our summers.
So our city forester indicated a tree inventory is necessary and a first step for the community to effectively manage our urban forest. If you don't know what trees you have, it can be difficult to know how to get to where you want to be without planning. Without an inventory, preparing an annual maintenance plan is based on guesswork, and there may not be enough money or time to take care of all the health issues. It also lays the groundwork for analysis for planning and consulting the basis for healthy, sustainable forest management in our city. So last year we budgeted 49.5, and as we started to we're almost in the process of completing and choosing the company. It's over $80,000. So I'm asking that we fully fund it. Again, Mayor, I appreciate the conversation, but I think that climate change is real, and it's at every level, every step that we make as a community to protect our vulnerable residents, to acknowledge what we can do for our individuals in our city. I'm not asking for a great deal amount of money. It was voted on by the tree board to ask for a fully funding, so this is was voted on prior to it going to the board, to the conversation in May. So I just would really like you to support this. It's not, like I said, it's $30,000. We said yes last time, and I think it's very important. Does anyone have any questions?
That's my line. Councilperson Streetman, you're recognized.
Mine actually is a question. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilperson. My question was, and you'll forgive me, I don't remember which meeting it was. I know it was a recent council meeting. It may have been the most recent, but you mentioned that there was a grant available that we could apply for.
Is that a question to the sponsor?
Yes, that's
You're
part of my
recognized,
question.
Madam
Yes.
Sponsor.
So we're working on the grant. The grant will also include mitigation, and actually we've actually kind of taken a few steps up I'm working with members of the community. The problem is if we commit to only doing half of the inventory, then to get the company to come back in will increase the cost. Whereas if we just contract for the full amount and then we do manage to get the grant, then that money will come back into the city.
The only thing is, I don't think that we can actually do that. I don't think that if we budget for it, then I don't think we can legally then apply for the grant, because that would be considered subplanting. So because they're saying you've already budgeted for this, so they're not going to allow us to do that.
Well,
So that's why I asked the question, if the grant's out there and available as a potential source of funding versus.
Well, I mean, we have other opportunities for that grant, because once we do the inventory, there is mitigation. So this inventory does not do anything for mitigation. And to go out and again, we've got to build our tree canopy back up from 17% to 30%. So we've got to know where and to mitigate that. So if that's not possible, then I would say let's fully fund the inventory, because that gives us, also that would be a piece of information that we could use to support when we request the grant.
What additional funding comes behind, because I know you're mentioning mitigation, what additional funding comes even then beyond this that's going to be needed?
Well, the inventory is, they go out, and if you look at the handout that I provided and I highlighted on the back side of the list, this is the list of what the next page.
Sorry.
Nope, that's fine there. This is basically the opportunities of when we let the contract that are available for the inventory. So there's no, we're going to plant a tree, we're going to mitigate. I mean, there's no other than these are your trees, and they're going to get, the other part of the inventory includes a database where they're going to set the database up, and we'll be able to then, the city forester will be able to say, I took this tree out, I put this tree in, and we'll be able to continue it. So it's a one-time, what do we have, and the first year of the software is part of the contract.
What is the cost of the software beyond that?
I think, I have not seen it in the newest one, but I believe last year it was $4,000.
For clarity, it's $10,000 for 3 years.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And
Well, that's one of the quotes that we have. We have not decided which.
Right. Councilperson Streetman, you have the floor.
I think that answered. So that would be the only cost, would be the 10,000 for the first 3 years. After that, beyond this $80,000.
Right, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilperson Holloman, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's $30,000 for a canopy study. So we spend $30,000 for a canopy study, and that's going to result in 0 trees being planted. Just from what I can see, like, why wouldn't we just put like $30,000 into the city buying saplings and then team up with, like, was it the Arbor Day Foundation? And on Arbor Day they give out trees, so you can go home and you can plant them. I mean, if our canopy is getting reduced, then why would we just not buy the saplings to give to residents to go out and plant more trees? Like, this isn't going to increase the amount of trees we have. It's just studying them. But that's all I've got. Thank you.
Councilperson Zacharias, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a budget amendment that I support, and I would ask all of you to support it as well. I'm going to just give you another perspective to look at this from. Every month during our executive sessions, we have the director of the Regional Planning Commission who comes in here, and he will describe the land that is proposed for rezoning. Usually, there may be a structure on the property, but oftentimes we hear that it's an unimproved lot or a wooded lot. And when we vote to change the zoning classification of those tracts, we are in essence voting to decrease the tree canopy in the city. And if $30,000 is going to help us make more informed decisions on those types of questions, then I support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilperson McLaughlin, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. And I apologize to the sponsor for asking these questions that everybody may already have the answers to. Is the inventory public and private land? The inventory would be conducted on trees that are on private and public properties?
That's a question to the sponsor, Councilperson Reynolds.
The inventory would only be on city property and our city parks. But because of how they're dispersed within the community, they give us an idea of the health of the trees, the number of the trees, and what type of trees. Many times there may be trees in certain areas, but they're really not good trees. They're invasive species, or they're not going to help with the water runoff. And just planting trees. We have opportunities to, we also talk about our drainage issues. Just planting any tree in a drainage area is not a good idea, but our city forester will be able to go into some of the lots that we are currently mowing or doing other things with, inventory the trees there, and make recommendations to increase that area so we don't have to mow so often. We could plant trees that will gather the water. So to answer short answer is city property.
Okay, thank you. And then if the inventory is completed, would the next step be requesting money to go in future budgets to plant said trees?
So we basically we got the tree, and we get an annual grant of trees, and we continue to get more, but we don't always have the historical data of what trees we need and where to plant them, because we don't know where they're at in our city. So it will actually improve our ability to request additional grants, knowing what we have, where we need to mitigate, clean out invasive and plant regular trees. It will improve our opportunities.
Thank you. And then just a comment in general is, I would probably be more in favor of this if this wasn't taking money out of the fund balance, if it was a substitution like the previous amendment. But I understand what you're trying to do, and thank you for answering my questions.
Councilperson Redd, you are recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe, as a previous speaker had stated, that we should wait for the grant. It was said that climate change is real. I don't know, but I don't think it is. I don't think there's a climate crisis. My daughter lives by Gulf Shores, and if the ocean levels are rising like it was once said from one of our past vice presidents, it's not happening there because they're still building right on the ocean. They say, well, it's all science. I believe that's true, but it's mostly political science. Trees give off carbon. That's exactly what it is. It's mostly political science, and I'm not going to vote for this, especially if we could get grant money, because I think a lot of this is just a bunch of hype. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized on your amendment.
I would like to clarify that we are already in the budget is 49,500 to do a partial inventory. I'm just requesting to increase it to do a complete inventory. So we already have it in the budget to do half of it. But again, in the long run, it will cost the city more money because then to get them to come back out will be increased cost. And to ask our city forester to finish it, we'll be pulling a very we'll be using her to do that instead of mitigating or managing our tree inventory. So I'd like to ask that. The other thing, and I would like to just remind you in the handout, that the areas that we get most of the zonings for now are our vulnerable communities. And they are the ones, if you look at the second page of the map, when I filtered out families living in poverty, and it's on the second map, you can see that those are the areas that we are now going in, clear cutting and building in without any review for tree canopy, and they are the at-risk population that we need to continue to protect.
Is that it? Okay. Councilperson Little, you are recognized on the amendment.
Thank you. I don't know if it's explained somewhere else or I missed it. Do we know how much area the partial assessment would cover?
I'll call on the sponsor of the amendment for an answer.
So one of the, and I know I have to be careful because we're reviewing the contract, so I have to be careful. But one of the assessments was per tree, so 10,000 trees. So if we only do partial, then our city forester will have to choose the areas that we will inventory as opposed to doing all of our city parks and all of our public property. So she would have to choose, and then once it's in, when we do the other half, then we would have to remember that and come back and not double it. Or in the meantime, she may plant trees somewhere, but we will have the database in full transparency. She would have the database to put some of that information in, but it's basically per tree. 10,000 trees is one of the contracts. There's another one that's a little bit different, but that I don't know if that answers. So we would have to pick the areas that we wanted to inventory.
Councilperson Little.
Okay. And so, with picking the areas, would it be possible to use something as pick certain areas and then use statistics to gather the rest?
Is that a question for the sponsor? Or just
it's not a question, it's just
okay.
a statement, I guess.
Okay.
College classes taught me statistics and everything like that as far as using what you have and doing certain things like that. I'm just wondering, maybe that might help and assist with us saving some money and not figuring out what the partial assessment does and what it brings forward, and before we go forward with anything else. So there's possibilities to be able to do this, and then maybe a grant might pay for the further assessment, but we can use statistics in order to try to gather what we have and maybe start from there. That's all.
Councilperson Redd, you're recognized.
I'd like to call for the question by voice vote. If there's
Any objection to the question? Hearing none, we are now voting on the amendment, the budget amendment number 2. All members, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
4 yes, 6 no, 0 abstain.
The amendment fails. We are now ready for Councilperson Holloman. Your amendment is amendment number 3. You're recognized.
All righty. So we got tuition reimbursement, and I've got example of a plan I've been working on. I'll pass that out.
Have you got the amendment?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you'll hand that out.
So
We'll get to that first, and then the plan.
Yeah. So I'd like to make a motion for approval.
Second.
Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of amendment number 3. I'll call this the Holloman
Two
amendment.
pages.
2 pages.
Yep, it's 2 pages.
Motion been made and properly seconded.
All right, so this is tuition reimbursement for the city employees. I'm only asking for $50,000. It's a kind of a simple plan, but what this does, this shows our city employees that the city of Clarksville is willing to invest back into them. You know, if they're willing to go to college or really any type of school that would benefit them in their job working for the city. And I'll just read the first part. So, who is eligible? The city allows both part-time and full-time associates with 90 days of continuous service who work with an average of 20 hours a week that are eligible to participate. Elected officials, that's us, we are not allowed to participate in this program. So you have to have at least a 20-hour average. There is differences for part-time compared to full-time. And that's on the second page. Talks about an annual calendar limit, but what I'd really like to see is just have this in place, and then just see who uses it. And so let's say we vote this in, and out of the $50,000, 30,000 of it is used. So then there's 20,000 left. So then the next year rolls around, all we do is pump in $30,000 more to get it back to the $50,000 mark, and so that way it's. It just mitigates the expenses, and I guess I mean it pretty much covers everything that the city entails. Talk like accounting, finance. We got public relations, legal studies, and that's pretty much the gist of it. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
Okay. This is a budget amendment and we're not adopting the plan. We're only addressing the budget amendment. It would be up to the Human Resources Department.
Okay. Well, in that case, this is a perfect example of what I would like to be seen implemented with the city of Clarksville.
All right. Councilperson Little, you're recognized on the Holloman Amendment.
I guess the only thing I would say is if it is one of those things where it's going to be a limited fund availability, I would like to see it done to people who are in the lower bracket of pay within the city instead of some of the I want everybody to be able to experience this, but if we're starting it off on a case-by-case thing to where there's a limited amount of money, I prefer to go to the people who are not making the higher pay level. I prefer for it to go to the people who are at the bottom of the totem pole, the people who are just, basically making, lower class, medium class income. I would like to see them push forward first. I would like to see everybody do it, but I'd like to see lower income push forward first. That's all.
Thank you. Councilperson Streetman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I realize we're not adopting the plan and it's just the funding. But I agree with the previous speaker in regard to what they were saying. I mean, I think that's great, especially, some of our entry level positions and things they could take to kind of help them move into other positions within the city. But I do hope that we do take into consideration some of the ideas that are covered on here for as far as learning other languages, sign language. I think things like this, if we can encourage our employees to do this, especially thinking about frontline employees, this is great for our citizens that are having to deal with or having to speak with our different representatives. And I mean, I would love to especially see things like that encouraged for our community.
Councilperson McLaughlin, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. My concern is who would facilitate this and what would the criteria be? The amount is 50,000. So that's my concern. My second concern will be what I said on the previous amendment is this is taking money out of the fund balance. It's not substituting one expense for another. And so I won't be here if that's for the reason. Thank you.
Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized.
Yeah, my question is to the sponsor is this coming from HR or have you already sat down and spoke to them about this?
I spoke to them about a year ago. It's been a slow running project I've been working on, and this tuition reimbursement program is kind of a conglomeration from a different bunch of businesses. I just kind of looked and just kind of tried to piece everything together. I know it is just an example, but I do think that this is very good. And when this passes, Mr. White can design it however he likes, and hopefully he's taking into account everything that's been set up here.
I support this and I think that it's a good idea, but I would the same as the previous conversation. I would like to have something more concrete, and perhaps between now and Tuesday, you could have a sit down with HR and get something more concrete to present before we just put $50,000 without any real plan.
There's a plan right here.
I mean, that's yours, but he hasn't approved it and he hasn't seen it, and who's gonna manage it? Where's the money? Where in the budget? How will it be earmarked in the HR budget? What line item will it be in their budget so they can manage it, and the people using it, and how is the tuition process and the payment gonna be done? I mean, all of that, I think, before we put money into their fund should be worked out. I mean, like, does that make sense?
To the sponsor.
I mean, if you want to vote it down, go ahead. It's, there's our employees right out there, I mean,
This
it's
isn't
to
a
support them. It's up to you though.
this isn't a voting down. This is saying that I would like a better outlined process before we move money unaccounted for. But this is not what line item in the budget is going to manage this. Where in the budget, on what line? May I call Ms. Mata to the
Well,
floor to
I'll
discuss
call
this?
your attention to the budget amendment form that was distributed. And it says provide funding for a pilot program of tuition reimbursement for our employees. It would be as a part of the Human Resources Department. So we're increasing by $50,000 the HR department budget for this pilot program. That's where it'll be parked. And they'll be responsible for developing the program under my supervision.
I just think that we should have a better outline than these are my ideas.
This is a solid worked up plan. I will share this with all the department heads as well. Just to prove that, okay?
Okay, Councilperson Little, you're recognized.
Thank you. I do like this idea. And just as Dave, I guess, explained before what the mayor said too, it would be set aside into the budget for the tuition reimbursement program, and that'd be something that they can start from the bottom up and work towards. And then not only that, it also encourages employee retention and also improves morale. You're giving them something to work towards. You're giving them opportunity that a lot of jobs don't give, especially in Clarksville. Unless you're one of these big corporations, but for a city to offer that is amazing. I think it's something that we should invest in, and we're going to get more talented individuals who are going to be trained and better able to work in Clarksville with our growing needs and concerns and everything else. So, sounds great.
Councilperson Red, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to make a suggestion and maybe perhaps ask the sponsor if maybe he could ask, and the mayor both, if you could ask the Human Resource Department, they could send us something maybe a little more specific and what their thoughts of it, if there's no objection. But I'm going to vote for it, and then we'll see second reading. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilperson Streetman, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you. And I'll make this brief. Even if we had the specific detailed plan about everything, again, I liked the ideas, and that was things on here. And I wanted that out there as another speaker for the HR department just to take into consideration. But even us as a council, we wouldn't be able to dictate specifically exactly how that would be developed and be done. We're able to give our suggestions. So even bringing something forward next week with a drawn up plan, there's nothing that would force them to go to utilize that. And I agree with the immediate previous speaker and what was said. And I not only was thinking that, but employee recruitment. I mean, it's just another tool to encourage people to want to come work for the city. We already have the greatest employees, great way to reward them, great way to continue to bring one of them in. So that's all of mine on this. I'll be voting in favor of this.
Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized.
Yes, Mayor, I would like to call Ms. Mata up and ask her a direct question.
Without objection, Ms. Matta, if you wouldn't mind, come forward. And we have a question from Councilperson Reynolds. You're recognized.
Thank you. So back to my accounting question. So I agree with what everybody has said, for the record. I agree with that. But how will we manage this? I mean, is that
So there's a line item, if we look at details of object codes. It would be object code, I think it's 4291, which is miscellaneous benefits for employees only. So it's restricted in that category, which is one of the categories that the mayor has to approve if funds get moved from there. So it would be line item detailed there.
Okay.
And if it gets spent for anything else, it would take the mayor's approval to spend it for anything other than that.
And just out of curiosity, what would be, so the mechanism would be that the person would have to finish their class and bring you a receipt?
I would say I'd have to work with HR on the specifics, but I can tell you I've had a tuition reimbursement program at another city that I've worked at. I think every city that I've ever worked at had it. Typically, and this is typical because HR would devise the policy, not me, but what I've typically seen is that they would have to be courses that fit what you're doing or what you want to become within the city. And then you have to usually get a certain grade or pass the class, and then you could submit reimbursement, and it could be a percentage that gets reimbursed or the whole class. It's usually some kind of parameter on it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other comment or question regarding this amendment? Are you ready to vote? We're voting on the amendment. Every member, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
9 yes, 1 no, 0 abstain.
Amendment 3 is adopted. Any other amendments? Seeing none, hearing none, are you ready to vote on ordinance 140? Councilperson McLaughlin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to publicly state that I'm voting at what I believe is the best interest of the city as a whole and not for the fact that my husband is a city employee. And then also I just have a brief statement, because I'm sure some department heads expected me to have a ton of amendments from my previous history here. But I want to say that since my last 4 years, I've spent a lot of significant time going through the budget, trying to understand what's happened in the last 4 years. Department heads have been very responsive in answering my questions, providing information. Ms. Mata answers questions on the weekends, and I really appreciate you all giving me that opportunity to learn. And although we're not facing a tax increase in this budget, I do have concerns about the next budgets, especially since next year is a property reassessment year, which we expect people's property value will go up and more taxes will be paid. I would like for us to consider in December taking a look back at what was budgeted and what has been sent through that point, and possibly look at coming with maybe a mid-year budget amendment to amend down. One thing I noticed as I was going line item by line item, there's some line items in some departments where their anticipated spend through the end of this budget year is less than what they were received as a budget item. But in some cases, they were asking for an increase. And so I just think it would be fiscally responsible for us to take a look at that mid-year and see if we can amend down a little bit to what the actual spending is. And I had some really great conversations with Chief Montgomery, and he's doing some great things. And we did toss the idea back and forth about a possible accreditation with the fire department. So if he does choose to go down that road, I will fully support his desire to have our fire department accredited. And thank you for allowing me to make comments.
Sure, thank you. Any other comment or question? We are now ready to vote on ordinance 140. Every member, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
10 yes, 0 no, 0 abstain.
Ordinance 140 is adopted. First reading. We're now ready for Resolution 68, 2022-23, a resolution to authorize an employer participating in the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System, TCRS, to reduce the amount of employee contributions the employer shall assume and pay to TCRS on behalf of its employees who are hired on or after July 1, 2023. I'll entertain a motion in a second. Motion been made and properly seconded in favor of Resolution 68. Any comment or question? Seeing none, hearing none, are you ready to vote on Resolution 68? All members, please cast your vote. Every member voted. Any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
9 yes, 1 no, 0 abstain.
Resolution 68 is adopted. The purpose for which this special session of the Clarksville City Council having been accomplished, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Without objection, we're adjourned.